welcome to Truth Wanted. I am your host, Objectively Dan. Joining me today is my good friend from the channel Let's Chat. It's Tyrone. What's up, Ty?
Hey, what's up, Dan?
Hey.
What a road.
Yeah, it's super cool. Yes, it really was. But you're here now. You've called into the show before. We've talked about street epistemology stuff before on other platforms, and now you're here co-hosting with me today. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah. Yes. I see you rocking the colors. My logo is naturally... Yeah. So for those of you who are still new to the show, or you just watched last week and you're wondering where the heck is Anthony, so the premise of this show is that I have rotating guest hosts every single week. Okay. And so that means that different people are going to come in with their different approaches, different perspectives. And if you really liked Anthony and you're kind of disappointed, don't be, because Tyrone is super awesome, especially at street epistemology. He has a channel just like Anthony where he goes out and he talks to people on the street about their beliefs, and it is awesome. He also has a podcast called The League of SEers, and that's not what's called, right? It's the League of SE, right? And League of SE Reviewers, that's what it is. And he talks about SE on that podcast with other people who do SE. Most of those people who will probably be on this show at some point. Yeah. And so I'm really excited for you to be here, Ty, because I'm so confident in your ability to talk to people that I think you're just such a great fit for this show. And I am just so excited to get started. But go ahead and tell some people like what you're about, like how you got into SE, like what your whole shtick is, you know? Mm-hmm. 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 Yes.
And aside from your taste in Pokemon, I think you're a really awesome person.
Why do you have to bring up our personal beef on the air like that, Tyrone? I don't
wait to have a really great conversation with you.
Oh my goodness.
Quick shout outs to Linda, quick shout outs to Ben. So glad that you guys are also tuning in, and hope that you get that chance to be on the show too. But yeah, my channel's called Let's Chat. I really mean it too. It's really just a chance to talk about anything that anyone wants to talk about. So I'll talk about religious topics or even mundane things in a really jolly way. And my goal is to try to show SE in the most casual way possible. I have a really kind of jolly vibe about myself. And I just want people to be able to dial into that and show that you can have a conversation without going to an SE mode, or without trying to sound like a disconcerted philosophy teacher. You could actually have a really nice casual conversation that dips in and out of SE in a really productive way.
Yes, and like jolly is such the perfect adjective to describe you, Ty, because every time I see you have conversations with people on your YouTube channel, you're always smiling, you're always making sure people are having a good time, and I see like a genuine happiness that comes from people when they have conversations with you. Even if they end up walking away like really challenged about their belief, they're still really interested in the conversation. So I think you just do a wonderful job at what you do, and I'm so glad that you're on the show.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Yes, absolutely. So without too much further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into the calls. Remember, the lines are still open. So if you or somebody else wants to call in and talk about their beliefs, whether it's karma or Bigfoot or crystals or urine therapy, that's a thing I learned is real this week. Go ahead and tell us about it, because we want to know and we want to have a conversation about it. Again, the number is on screen and we are here to take your calls. But let's go ahead and jump into our first call. This is Cody from Minnesota. Cody, what's going on, man? We're going to go ahead and get into the call. Oh, hello.
Hi.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Hey, how's it going, Cody?
Cody.
Good.
Cool. I have a note here saying you want to talk about how reproduction is immoral.
Yeah.
It's
Yes. So tell me more about this belief.
Well, all right. So basically, at least from what I know, like before like a life is like created or whatever, or made, like it doesn't exist at all. Would you kind of also agree with that? Like before something, before like a life is created, like it doesn't exist. Would that?
I can see how you could come to that conclusion. So you're saying basically, yeah. So like life, like me, the person that exists as objectively Dan doesn't exist until like my biological body does. That's kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What else to that?
All right. So, basically, when people decide that, or really anyone, but like people especially, since they they can actually like reason it more. Like when they want to bring like a life like into existence, there's like when it boils down to it, it's kind of like selfish. Like there's not really a reason to like a non-selfish reason to bring a life that will eventually like grow up to be like a living, thinking, feeling thing into existence, especially when there's like no guarantee of like happiness or pleasure or joy at all. In fact, there are some lives that in certain areas where a lot of the time they suffer a lot, go hungry and things like that. But even like in a society with like a better economy and stuff, there's like no guarantee of anything like that, and there's almost certainly guarantee of like pain and suffering. But even even if you say that, well, if you never exist in the first place, you can't feel pain and suffering. There's like none of that, or I would assume so. If you don't exist.
So if I could summarize just for a second, you're basically making the case that because we have the ability to bring people into life, and because they have the capacity to suffer, it's therefore immoral to kind of give these people life, essentially, because we don't ensure that their life is going to be one that you might consider worth living.
Yes, that, and also in non-existence, people say you'd like miss out on like happiness and things like that too, but in non-existence you don't need nor want happiness or pleasure. The concept isn't even it's kind of hard to explain, because when you don't exist you're not really there to experience. But and of course, like my for people that believe in the afterlife and stuff, I feel like my argument is even stronger, because if you bring someone into existence, there might be a chance that either they'll go to a bad afterlife, or they'll not like the afterlife they go to, or things like that. So
I see. There's an added risk, is what you're saying, whenever you add people into life, essentially, because there could be an afterlife with an eternal torture to it.
Yeah, but
okay.
I don't believe that there is, but for people that do believe, I think it's even more.
Well, Ty, I want to hear you tackle this. What would you ask? Yeah.
Cody, I'm just wondering, without a doubt, there's definitely potential for them to feel pain and suffering, but would we not agree that there's also a potential for them to feel pleasure and happiness, other enjoyable things about life?
Yeah, but there's what I was trying to say earlier with that argument, because that's like the natural thing that most people go to. Like, I haven't really had like a real discussion with this with anyone, but that's what I hear.
I think I saw your YouTube comments at the start before the video was airing. Was that you?
Yeah, I think so.
Awesome, Cody. Cool. It's nice to be able to talk to you. But I guess I'm just wondering, is it possible for every birth, for that life to experience both pain as well as, like good things like happiness or like love?
It's not only possible, but very likely that they will. But at the same time, it's not only possible that they'll experience both like good and bad things, but they almost certainly will. But in a lot of times, there are a lot more bad things than good things, and like the good things, but anyways, back to Tyrone's question, about that stuff, happiness and joy and stuff. When you don't exist, you don't even need or want any of that in the first place. There is no need or want for that, and you're guaranteed to not have the bad stuff either. The only time you actually need goodness and happiness is if you're living. What?
I guess I'm wondering. May I throw out an example?
Sure.
If say I had a child, just me specifically, and that kid ends up having a terrible life, is that my fault because I made that kid? Did I commit something wrong? Just so I understand.
Yeah, but okay, so your question is, if you had a child and it ends up having just a terrible life, is that your fault?
Yeah.
Is that the question? All right. So
yeah, more or less, yeah.
I'd say that because you let that child into life, you ran the risk for it to have a terrible life, and obviously without that child's consent, because you can't have consent for something that doesn't exist yet. But there's the chances of having a super great.
If I have a child, the child grows up and this child decides to rob a bank and he gets caught and put to jail, am I responsible for the crummy life that he's now going to live in jail?
Well, I wouldn't say you're legally responsible, that's for sure. But because I don't think you should be necessarily thrown in jail. But at the same time,
I guess I wonder. And the point is, when am I responsible for the actions of someone else?
Well,
just wondering.
All right. Okay, so what's your question again?
I guess when would I be responsible for the actions that someone else decides to do?
All right. I do think that for whatever your offspring do, it is when it comes down to it does kind of have some some blame on you, not necessarily in a legal sense, but
in a moral sense.
Because sure, in a moral sense, because the world would just be
what is a moral sense? What do you mean when you say moral sense?
All right, let me think. So
that's great. That's a great response, by the way.
Let's say murder is legal. Let's say it's the purge, okay? Murder is legal.
Murder, the illegal killing of people is now legal? My brain is
No. Okay, so let me.
apart.
Sorry, I just want. Okay, because I want to take away like the law and stuff. All right.
Okay.
And if you're moral.
So killing is legal, essentially.
No, I don't mean that literally.
Yeah.
It's like
No,
all
I
right,
know.
A scenario by which there's no legal repercussions for killing another human being.
It's Hunger Games.
Yeah.
Is it the
All right,
Reckoning?
so
What's the name of that movie? Anyone want to help me out?
All right.
The Purge. They already said it. Come on, Ty.
So,
Get with the
I'm just trying to
game.
keep up.
So if you believe that it's wrong to like kill someone like regardless of law, then like you're like if like you know the purge happened or whatever, and
Right.
like and it would be convenient for you to you know off someone for whatever reason, like maybe it's for revenge or because they're in your way of doing something, but you still don't, even though it's legal. Then you know it'd be like. You know, it'd be because you are like, you know, morally
obligated.
It'd be like your morals not kill humans.
Ooh.
But if you did decide to kill the human, then yes, you'd be like the moral blame would be on you because you obviously killed the human. Obviously, you wouldn't be.
Let me ask you, Cody. Do you believe in
more? Amazing point.
Yeah. Do you believe in moral obligations?
Moral obligation.
Yes.
Could you define it for me?
So, like, kind of what you were saying before, it sounded like you were saying that we as human beings have a moral obligation not to kill each other.
Well, if, like, maybe not everyone thinks that, but, like, you know, I, like, to an extent, I guess it is sort of subjective, but, like,
Hey, let me make something clear here. We are not trying to grill you, okay? Like we are trying to explore this thing together. So
give me a hard time.
Yeah, if anything, for sure. So
I'm trying to figure out how I want to word things.
For sure. Yeah. These things are difficult. And don't let anybody else tell you otherwise, especially when we're talking about subjects of morality and ethics. Some people like to just wave it off and say that, oh, it's not a big deal, but it really is when you really come down to it. And there's a lot of questions that I certainly don't have the answers to. So I implore you, first of all, for coming on the show and talking about some of your beliefs, especially with antinatalism, because I think antinatalism it's just not a common subject that you always hear talk about, but I find it incredibly fascinating. And I'm not sure that I personally have answers either way. But
Cody, would you mind if I ask you a question that I thought was a pretty salient point that you made? You had said that when someone commits murder or kills someone, it's their fault. They did something bad. It seems like people are responsible for their actions. And the more immediate they are to the person and the action, that person's definitely responsible. And I think in a society where we have like, hey, that guy killed somebody, we should put him in jail. Are you saying then we should also put the parents in jail? Because they're equally as responsible, or are they less responsible?
Like, it would be a pretty chaotic world if you ended up putting everyone's parents in jail for putting their kids in jail and then putting their parents in jail for, you know. Do you think it would be a moral thing to do to put their parents in jail? But, like, I don't think, all right, would it be the moral thing?
Hey, let me ask you this, Cody. If we went to another caller and then maybe you wanted to call back later about this, would you like to do that?
Sure.
Okay. This is just an option for you, just to give you some time to think about it a little more, and we can talk about it a little more.
Yeah. I like that, Dan. That's a great idea. Cody, you cool with that?
All right, so.
Okay. Well, if you like, Cody, go ahead and call back at the number. And if not, that's cool too. I'm sure there's some people in the chat who'll be willing to have a conversation about that. But I appreciate the call, Cody, and I hope you do call back in a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. We talked about antinatalism before on one of the proto episodes of Truth Wanted. And again, it's one of those kind of open-ended conversations. I think, I personally don't I don't have an opinion on either way at this point. I'm sure that there's more reading on the subject that I could probably do. I don't know if you have any strong feelings one way or the other. Do you, Tyrone?
Yeah, I think we have too many people to necessarily be relying on just ourselves. We have to rely on another generation to come and fix some of the problems that we have now and continue some of the good ideas that we have. Like our future is our children. And while I wouldn't say everybody go out and have babies, that's not going to solve any problems. I'm totally fine if people choose to do that with their own lives. And I don't see a connection between the actions of an adult child versus a parent. I always think people are obligated to their own actions. And if they act as a separate agent, they need to be culpable for their own consequences.
Yeah, I think there's some merit to that response. I think some people might say like, oh, well, there's unpredictable circumstances that you're bringing a child into that, nobody could ever predict. And just by that alone, there's a risk of you doing that. And that risk kind of implicates, the immorality of the situation.
Ooh, yeah. I love nuance. So everything I say has exceptions. But that's a good point.
Yeah, I think there's definitely more to it, but let's go ahead and go to another caller. This call is from Frank in Louisiana. Frank, can you hear us?
Yes.
Hey, what's up? I have a note here
Nice.
saying you have 8 kids who believe in God, and you do not.
Yeah, I do. my youngest one.
How about 9?
My youngest one's
Let's go.
My youngest one's 17. And my oldest one is 32.
Okay.
It's funny because we debate out. I found y'all show, I think, like 2 weeks ago on TV by accident. I was searching through YouTube, and man, looky here. You just do. Where I live at in Louisiana, this is Catholic country, as I call it.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say, you said you saw us on
You cannot
TV.
say nothing bad about a priest out here, because if you do, it's like, oh, my God, they're not right. They're not telling the truth. It's like these people have raped little... And when you get to start showing them where it's at, or showing what happened, people do not like that. And do not say you're an atheist as a black person. I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness.
My mom's a Jehovah's Witness.
And as a black person, you cannot say you don't believe in God because you're going straight to hell.
I feel that, man.
Ooh.
So
Tyrone, you're
like,
pressure,
okay.
Yeah.
just based on how you
mean,
look
so
like
you mentioned
you should believe in.
Well, my kids, they just think, well, dad is being dad. And I like them believe, if you want to believe in God, that's fine. Go ahead. That gets you through your day. But as for me, I've seen what happened.
Jehovah's Witnesses too?
No, they're not. No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, good.
No.
Well,
Their mothers, my first wife, she was Baptist, but she died.
Okay.
My second wife was Catholic, and evidently religion didn't work out too well for her. Then my third wife, she was Baptist. She's Baptist, and I don't know what the hell is happening with that. So it was like, okay. But I know the only thing you can change is I can only change myself. And that's being a human. That's just not believing in God. I always get confused when people say, well, God blessed me when I went to the casino. It's like, no, he didn't. If you think about it, if you read the Bible correctly.
Can I ask you a weird question, Frank?
Sure, go ahead.
Is that cool? What if all 8 of your kids are right? How do you know that you have the...
And then if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And from my understanding, the belief of the Bible is you can ask for forgiveness in the last second. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
Some gods are totally with that. You have to read that disclaimer.
You see?
Yeah, that's it.
See, that's how it's in the Bible, though. It's like at the last second, forgive me, okay? Go ahead,
all right. Dan, what's on your mind?
We take things too personal.
Yeah. So I want to know, like, what was it that convinced you that I'm assuming you take the position that there aren't any gods, or do you just hold the belief that there are any gods?
If I have to believe in something I can't see, I have to believe in vampires, werewolves.
Okay.
I like that.
And as soon as I don't know if you ever watched True Blood or not.
Never seen it.
I love that show.
I want to watch it. Please no spoilers.
Oh man,
Sorry.
look, when you gonna start watching,
Okay.
you're not going to stop. But if I'm
I'm
going
down,
to
I'm
believe
down.
in stuff, you know, it's like with dinosaurs. You can talk to people about there was no such thing as dinosaurs. It's like, man, you're finding all these fossils. Come on now.
Yeah.
They're
So it
finding
sounds like Frank's saying,
elephants frozen in ice.
Yeah.
yeah,
Go ahead,
the
Chen.
standard of evidence is so low, or that if he chose to believe in God, he'd have to believe in a bunch of other stuff. So he may not have the position that he believes in no God. It's just that he doesn't want to lower his standard of evidence.
Yes, I agree.
I
It
think that's
sounds
great.
like it's a withholding of belief until the belief meets a certain criteria. So I'm assuming, Frank, that you would believe in vampires if you did see evidence for it, or what you would be convinced of as evidence.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence.
Nice.
Okay. Yeah, me
Frank,
too.
There's
The
no
hero of
evidence of
Louisiana.
Santa Claus.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
still waiting for Santa Claus. And we live.
Hey, man,
we live,
there's evidence
we live
for Santa
close to a
Claus.
golf course.
Frank, don't you know there's evidence for Santa Claus?
Dan's
get
very young, guys.
I've been waiting to see
I
him.
get
It's okay.
listen,
Don't break his
listen,
heart.
listen to this. I get presents every year on the 25th. Where do those presents come from?
They're little Squirtle plushies.
That's evidence. That's real.
Yeah, I've been waiting every year for him to come through the chimney. We don't have no chimney.
See,
Oh yeah.
that's why. See, you can come up with explanations. No chimney. That's why.
But there's always presents there.
Frank,
And when
good
that
call.
credit card bill come in, you can hear them. You can hear everybody screaming in the house.
Yeah.
But I love y'all's show. Like I said, as soon as I started watching it, I just fell in love with it.
Well, great.
Because I
Frank.
wish more people start looking into things instead of just taking
Preach.
at one book word.
Preach.
Because you
Nice.
got over 208 different religions. Which one is right?
Only
At-
208.
At least 208, Frank.
At least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You go to my mom's
that's a-
hometown. There's a new religion on every block. There's like
Yeah. I'd say
Oh, yeah.
that's a conservative
I mean,
estimate.
Now you got and these high dollar preachers that I call them. Now they need private jets.
Yeah.
It's like because
Oh.
Jesus wouldn't have walked across. He wouldn't have made it over there without using a jet.
Frank,
He's the
you're-
son of God, supposedly.
You're speaking
He
some
would've
truth
been-
right now. I love it. It's
you're
great.
also
You know,
preaching to a choir.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Well, Frank, I really appreciate.
but I know a lot of Christian people get mad and they get upset because of stuff like that.
Yeah, they do.
And
but
it's not making fun, but it's just taking logic into your head. Because as soon as you mention the Old Testament to a lot of people, oh no, that's no good. That's we don't go by that no more. We go by the New Testament. But they mention the Ten Commandments and about being gay and whatever else. It's like, well, that's the Old Testament. You said you didn't like it.
yeah.
You got rid of it.
Frank, let me tell you this. You have these kids that are believers. I'd say tell them to watch my show, right? And tell them to
Yes.
watch some of the other ACA
Oh, they
shows
do.
here. Have them call in. I'd love to talk to them. The lines are open every Friday night at 6 Central Time. We are here for you and your kids. So,
And not only that, but check out videos of street epistemology on YouTube to learn how to have really productive conversations with people, even family members, about
Yeah, because a lot of time a lot of time with other people, my conversation get kind of heated, and I will cut people off in a heartbeat because they get talking about Christianity like it's like okay, but you got to look at it beyond that.
yes. And you know what? I think that there are methods that we can use to have better conversations without having to necessarily cut people off or get mad or do all kinds of things. I truly believe that if we take the time and we pace ourselves when we have these conversations, we can get to really productive talks. So I really appreciate you calling.
I'm getting.
Yeah, Frank, I'm going to have to let you
so
go.
much.
We're going to have to go on to our next caller. But Frank,
Frank.
you've made my day today. Thank you for calling, sir. And like I said, get your
Yeah,
kids
have
to
a good
call
one.
on next week, okay? I'll be
All right,
looking
man.
for
Yeah,
them.
have a good one.
Be good,
All
my
right.
brother.
You take care. That was great.
I like that. I like Frank. He's great.
I love it. But
Not only that, but from Louisiana.
that's right, man. I'm originally
Yeah.
from Louisiana myself.
No way. Get out of here.
Yes, it's a true story. I was born there.
Oh.
And, I think it's a Southern thing, what he's talking about, this kind of culture of, when you try to talk to people about their beliefs and stuff, sometimes people can get ornery about it. People can get offended, especially if you're like specifically calling something out. If you're saying that's BS, that's not real.
Sure.
Because I think
he also spoke to there's a Pew poll that says about 82% of Black people in America identify themselves as religious. Though, if you try to talk to them, it's a one of those ambiguous things, or one of those, hey, I go to the church on my local street, stuff like that. So I definitely felt my heart went out to him as well there too. It's definitely hard as a Black guy to not be religious or subscribe to a particular God belief. That's why it's good to have Black non-believers. I definitely recommend that Facebook group. And
yes,
they're
we
a really
had
great group.
Mandisa
I
Thomas.
got to hook up with them in Atlanta.
Yeah, Mandisa Thomas, the founder of Black Non-Believers, came here a few weeks ago and gave a talk, and she's on YouTube. She's got all kinds of stuff. So if you are a Black non-believer and you want to know more about that stuff, I definitely recommend it. But for now, we need to go on to our next caller. This is from Dylan, I think, in California. Is that right?
It's DeLon.
DeLon. Hey, DeLon.
Yeah, very fancy.
Yeah, I like it. What's going on, dude?
Oh, nothing much, man. Just love the show. I like the fact that you guys are based on epistemology. I love epistemology, and just the study of how people come to know what they do and maybe challenge and unpack certain beliefs. It's just really healthy, really fun.
Yes.
And I love the show for that.
Oh, thanks. We love it too. I mean, both Ty and I have a huge history with having these kinds of conversations with people, and we love it. We love that we can have this call-in show now to get people to call in. But you called in with a very interesting belief, and I'm just going to read what I have written down here. It says, you think that consciousness is maybe fundamental in the universe. Can you expand on that a little bit? Yeah, tell me more.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Basically, there's, when I say fundamental, I mean it's what reality is based on.
Okay.
So, there's three views. Maybe I'll start with kind of framing the issue, and it kind of tells you why it led me to what I kind of lean towards. I wouldn't say I bought into any one way or the other. I always keep my mind open, but it just seems that I'm leaning towards one way more than another. So there's a very strict materialist view, right?
Okay.
And it's been called a lot of different things in the philosophy of mind. You can call it emergence or epiphenomenalism. It's basically the view that mental events like thoughts and feelings are all caused by physical events in the brain.
Ooh, hey.
And of course, those are effects. They're not causes themselves.
Are you in a good place where you can talk on the phone right now? You're breaking up just a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me move over a little bit.
You're good now.
Signal issue.
I think you're good now.
Is it a little better?
Yeah, there was a little bit of breakup there, but
side of the couch.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, awesome. So really quick, I'll kind of restate it. There's a strict materialist viewpoint.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like epiphenomenalism, emergence is kind of a way to say that physical or mental events are caused by physical events in the brain.
Okay.
But of course, the mental events have no causative power because they're just effects from physical things like a brain, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one viewpoint, and I kind of I have a lot of problems with that viewpoint.
Okay.
But then there's two
this
other
guy hates brains.
options.
Yeah, this.
Mm-hmm.
You can go ahead and give your spiel. I'm curious if we could. I wonder if we could summarize by just talking about what you actually believe, and maybe just going from there.
So exactly. So this is what I wanted to talk to you about because I'm kind of torn between these other two things. I mainly believe that this is either the answer to the hard problem of consciousness is either going to be panpsychism. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I'm aware.
Or the other one that I'm kind of leaning towards is idealism.
Okay.
Are we sure it's only those two things?
Yeah, that's the thing. So we could talk about the dichotomy, but first, let me give a disclaimer before we even talk about any of this stuff. Okay. So my show is called Truth Wanted, and the reason why I call it Truth Wanted is I want people to tell me what they believe, and I ask them questions about it, and that is it to it. I am not the bringer of truth. and I don't claim to be. I don't claim to know anything in particular. I will talk about sometimes some things I believe, sometimes in between calls and stuff, but I am not the truth bearer. Right. So I'm not the authority on that. So just to be clear, when we have this conversation, I am more interested in how you got to the belief that you got to. And I may question some of the methods, but my job is not to tell you what's true and what's not true necessarily, if that makes sense.
Cool.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Let's just pick one. Let me just, for the sake of conversation, let's say that idealism is what I believe in.
Okay.
Cool.
And it pretty much is, I mean, in a sense, because for one thing, the premise of my epistemology here is, number one, what I do know 100% is that I'm conscious. In other words, I know that I'm on the phone experiencing a conversation with you right now.
Ooh.
Right?
You know that to 100%?
So
100%.
I know that 100% for certain. I mean, I may be wrong about what I perceive in the world, but I'm not wrong about perceiving that in the world, right? Does that make sense?
So you're not wrong about your sense of perception itself. You are confident that you are a perceiving being?
There you go.
Or just that perceiving?
There you go.
Because the being thing could that
anything else could be an illusion, right? I could just be dreaming we're on the phone right now having this conversation. But I'm 100% confident that I'm having that experience.
You're having an experience. Okay.
Okay, that's the number one point.
I hear you.
The number two, and so the number two thing is that having this viewpoint, if I was to say that I live in a mind, what I'm pretty much saying with idealism is not solipsism. Solipsism is to say that only my mind exists. But what I'm trying to say is that I live in a world, that I live in a mind of minds, okay?
Okay.
So what this does, it changes nothing about how I understand the world, like the laws, the rule sets, the physics. It changes nothing and it adds nothing. The only thing it does, it just shifts the foundations around in order to achieve a more parsimonious or elegant view. So that hard problem I was referring to naturally dissolves away. And the attraction to this is why I'm kind of more attracted to it than the other ones, is that simpler explanations are better than complex ones. If a theory is more parsimonious, then it pretty much means that it's simpler and more elegant when compared to the alternatives. And not so much hand-waving, not so much explanations. These other ones run into logical problems. They run into evidential problems and different logical fallacies. But the idealism viewpoint seems to be more correct in my view.
Okay.
Can I ask you two questions?
Sure.
Just as a summary, you said you believe in idealism because, one, it gives your outlook, even though it doesn't change anything, gives your outlook a more parsimonious, harmonious, perspective. And then the second was it's more simpler than alternatives.
Yes, than the alternatives that are out there currently.
My first question would be, just wondering, is it possible for me to like something that's parsimonious, even harmonious, even the best thing I've ever heard, and for it to be wrong?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I guess the second question would
possible
be,
to be wrong.
Is there things that are complex that are very true?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Cool. Dan,
absolutely.
What do you think?
Yeah. So, gosh, you're bringing up the philosophy of epistemology to its very core. You're talking about Descartes. You're talking about, this is the history of Western thought that's going on in this conversation right now. Yeah, no, you're getting real deep into this, and I admire that you're really, really skeptical of your own worldview, and you want to make sure that what you're trying to do is right. But here's what I want to know also, and this is adding on to Ty, because how can you ever be 100% sure of anything? Even if you're a perceiving being, right?
Or how about this? How could you be 100% sure about something when the two reasons that you presented can both be right or wrong?
That's a better way to,
Yeah, I know 100% that I'm conscious, that I'm having, it goes back to Descartes. I think, therefore I am, or maybe you could say it, I am because I'm conscious, right? I'm actually having an experience. I could be wrong about everything else, but the one thing I cannot be doubting is the fact that I'm having an experience.
Yes.
Right? That I know firsthand.
I'm giving you a hard time here because I have very similar views on perceptions of the world and how we can come to true beliefs. But I'm less worried about the whole brain in the vat scenarios that a lot of people like to talk about in these conversations. And I'm generally more interested in the methodology you use to come to believe how a belief is true. And so it's kind of tricky when we talk about these things because in order to justify our base beliefs, we kind of have to use other methodologies. And it's hard to get past experience itself because it's kind of hard to deny that we're even having the experience.
So let's look at the alternatives. Maybe that's a good way to kind of wean that down to exactly what you're referring to now. If you looked at the strict materialist view, they sort of, or one of the examples is kind of like consciousness is kind of like the wetness of water, right? Like that if you combine oxygen molecule, with H2O, and then boom, voila, you get
that's
water,
peroxide,
right?
Oh,
yeah, or peroxide, exactly. You get those,
Tyrone.
You get those definitions.
Tyrone is literally a scientist, and so he will correct you.
Yeah, peroxide or water. Yeah, I saw that, and I would say that the problem with that analogy is that it's a huge categorical error, right?
Ooh,
because we're talking about, in that case, combining two physical things to have another physical outcome. But what I think people forget,
can I just,
philosophers, go right ahead, I'm sorry.
If I may interrupt, I'm sorry. And I hate using the word interrupt. That's like one of my big no-no words. I'm sorry about that. I'm a donkey. Anyway,
no problem.
I'm wondering, Daylon, if we took materialism and threw it off a cliff because it's completely wrong, and we lit a match and threw it over the cliff with it, and there was a big explosion, how does destroying materialism prove that you're right? And how do you get to a position where you can justify your confidence?
Not at all, because this is the thing. Materialism itself, as observations of that philosophy or that assumption, actually works. It's the reason why we're on this phone talking. It's the reason why we can have computers. A lot of good has come about from that philosophy.
But you don't consider. Let me clarify. But you don't consider consciousness to be the result of a material process.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. This is the difference. Materialism accounts for the contents of consciousness.
Okay.
If consciousness is fundamental, then materialism works. Like I said, nothing would ever change. Nothing we observe, the rules, the way the universe works, never changes. Where material, in the evidence for that, for right now anyways, is that materialism has no explanatory power.
If there's no difference between what we can observe with this model that you presented with reality and materialism as we understand it, if there's no measurable difference, I think I'm still going to be in the need of a good methodology for you to arrive at your conclusion. Because right now we're not working with anything, and we don't have anything that we can test or use to support the claim that you've made. If there's no difference,
right?
If we took
that, I know, and this is,
but I'm open.
This is kind of like at the top of the disclaimer that I was kind of giving you. I secretly I do have some reservations about. I'm not satisfied with idealism.
How can you have reservations?
100%.
This guy just said he's 100%. We got him. Points.
At a scale from 0 to 100, I'm probably like about 50% or something like that.
Okay.
So
okay.
It's I just wanted to say I believe it just so we can kind of have a starting point here.
Gotcha.
But now there is another one that I'm also kind of.
How do you feel about I don't know as an answer for at least right now?
No, absolutely, I mean? and I agree. I don't know 100%. The only thing I know is I'm conscious, That's all I know 100% out
You know
of
what?
anything else in
I
this
would
world.
encourage you to explore these things called the logical absolute, because there's 3 other
Mhm.
things you can know to a near 100%, if anything, 100% confidence.
Oh, my
And once you get
goodness.
those in your belt, it's like, oh, I got some things I can know for certain. Might
Ooh.
make you feel
Mhm.
more parsimonies.
Tyrone coming in with these logical absolutes, thinks he can know stuff.
Dan believes in
Typical
science.
arrogance.
Yeah.
All right.
It's just that, if, and, everybody has to form an opinion, or everybody does form an opinion.
Yes.
And there are more stronger opinions than others. And I would say that, panpsychism or idealism seems to be more stronger depending on what day of the week it is.
Yes.
I mean, strict materialism just doesn't do it for me. There's the combination fallacy. There's the category problems. There's a lot of different issues. And even AI researchers, people who actually put these things to test, are more leaning towards a panpsychic view. And that's how they're kind of...
Yeah.
Let me try asking you this.
Oh,
Like, if I had a
Ty, let's
coin,
let's wrap it up a little bit. Now let's make this the last question. Is that cool with everybody?
Cool.
Sure. Yes,
Awesome.
yes, sir.
So,
Cool.
Delon, if I had a coin and I flipped it, caught it, put it on the back of my hand, it'd be heads or tails, but I don't know the answer. I would imagine you wouldn't either. Wouldn't I don't know be the best answer until we have better evidence to figure that out?
I mean, we could always go to Schrodinger's cat. It's probably heads and tails at the same time until we observe it. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, you're right. I don't know is the best answer. Absolutely.
All right.
Fantastic answer.
That's all we needed. Well, thank you so much for calling. This was a really interesting conversation. I want you to call again sometime so we could talk about this a bit more, because we started with consciousness, maybe the fundamentals of the universe, and I think we kind of sidetracked it to some other things. But it's a really interesting proposition, and it's something I'd love to explore in the future, for sure.
Exactly. Absolutely. Just look at your partner and say, how do you know that person is conscious right now? How do you know that?
He's not. Tyrone's a zombie. He's not actually conscious. He's a pea zombie. So anyway, thanks again for calling. Really appreciate it. Man, that was really, really interesting. I think it's worth pointing out too that we may be able to. There's a difference between just like the verification of how we can come to know things, and also like what the truth of reality might actually be. So like reality,
true. Just because we agree on something doesn't mean that that's what is.
So we may actually agree on what the best methods are based on what we believe to be fundamental, but they may not actually correlate with the things that are outside of ourselves, because we are limited conscious beings, and there's going to be knowledge of things that we'll never have certainty of, just by definition of being subjective beings. So it's hard for me to. It's hard for me to say that we. Let me finish real quick. It's hard for me to say that we can have the consciousness as a fundamental to something without knowing. I think that we can break consciousness down a bit more. I think that there seems, at least in my view, there's natural processes that can almost explain consciousness to a sense, and it's hard for me to get that as a fundamental view. And we didn't really talk about that. But anyway, you were going to say something.
I was saying if we rely on observable phenomenon in order to develop a body of evidence that we can test and become more confident about our findings, if there's no difference in our observable phenomenon, and that just means things that we are capable of testing, we can't come to a justifiable conclusion. And that's what I was kind of worried about when he said, hey, there's absolutely no difference if you took my model. It's like, well, then how do we know that's any more reliable than the current one we have if you're willing to dismiss one in favor for the other?
Because we have no method of discerning the two in the reliability. Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's true. This stuff's complicated, guys. There's a reason why people get degrees in this stuff, but it is fun, and it is, I'd say, important more than just speculation. It's important that we kind of figure out the basic rules of this stuff. Even though we're probably never going to all agree. But that's okay. That's what call-in shows like this are for, so that we can just yell at each other and never find any solutions. I'm just kidding. We can just have a good time. All right, so next call is from Jackson in Nebraska. Jackson, can you hear us?
Yep.
Awesome. So I have a note here that just says definitions of God. Tell me about that. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this fairly recently. I realized that really in any conversation between atheists, theists, and I guess deists, we always talk about whether we believe in God, whether God exists. But I was then thinking we don't really spend a lot of time establishing in those conversations what we mean by God. And I found that to be kind of a tough thing to answer, at least personally.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Sure.
I grew up with a certain concept of God within my own religious community. And as soon as I started to explore the history of theology and the history of how different people interpreted this idea of Christianity and Judaism, my concept of what God was changed. And, you know, there's the New Age types kind of that say God is everything or God is, you know, I like the definition that said that God was the ground of all being for a while. But I think I also used that definition because it also made God like really hard to poke and prod at, so that I didn't have to think about maybe the implications fully of his existence and stuff and what that would actually mean for reality and stuff. What are your thoughts on this, Tyrone?
I think I had a pretty similar nebulous understanding of God, and it was nebulous by design because it was there to fill in any gaps that I didn't know about the world around me. And so if I ever had an issue personally with my understanding about reality, I could always fit in God there, and it was just comfortable, you know, goop that I could fill in gaps with.
Yes.
And
yes.
it was purely just for that. In retrospect, I realized it was mostly just a comfort mechanism.
Yeah, for sure. We kind of like create these, like I was saying, these definitions of God that are able to work with what we already believe about how the world works. So if you already grew up in like me, like I grew up with an understanding of an old Earth. I grew up with an understanding of evolution and stuff, and I was able to make God fit in with all this background information that I already knew. And there's some people that like quite vehemently disagree with that, who say that no, this background information actually has to fit in with this concept of God, and like the God definition comes first before we understand the other information. What do you think about this, Jackson?
Here, 1 second.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so definitions of God are super tricky, to put it shortly.
Yeah.
And that's why always when you're talking to somebody about, you know, if they believe in God and you want to explore that belief with them, definitely 100% first thing, ask them what they mean by God. Because I guarantee like, I don't know if you've experienced this, Tyrone. You've had a lot of conversations with people. Pretty much everybody will give you a different answer. I mean, some of them may be similarly worded, but most of them are pretty different.
You know, something I notice is even if they say, hey, I'm a Christian, it's worthwhile to ask them what they mean by that too. Terms that people take for granted are the ones that people have personally identified with and skewed to fit their personal lifestyles. And it's worth the effort to figure out what angle they're coming from before you try to learn more about them. I think if they closely identify with a label or a label, a God label, or how they label themselves, take the time to try and understand where they're coming from.
Yes, it's always important to figure out what people, and give people the benefit of the doubt. Ask them what they mean by what they're saying, so that you can give, you know, when you question them, your questions are genuine and are in good faith. Because if I'm like accusing somebody like, oh, so you believe in the God that flooded the whole world and killed a bunch of people? Well, hang on, wait a minute. We haven't established that at all. That's, first of all, that's a Christian view of God, and that's also a very specific interpretation of, or like a Jewish view of God as well. I don't want to discount that, but you know, like not everybody has an interpretation of that Bible verse in that way, and the Bible may not necessarily have anything to do with their belief in God. So you don't want to make any assumptions when you're going into this thing. Jackson, can you hear us?
Asking questions and willing to learn from the person that you're talking to, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I was raised Judeo-Christian, and I still like had a lot of scientific knowledge. I wasn't really fundamentalist in that way, but I realized, I do have a very Judeo-Christian idea or a biblical idea of what God is when I'm in these conversations. So do you think as a skeptic or as skeptics, it's our job to first figure out what they mean and then see if you can argue against that?
Well, so... go ahead, Tyrone. You answer first.
Well, maybe not. Well, I don't know. I may have a different idea from Dan.
Okay, well, we'll give our answers. You go first.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I would say my main goal ask questions, try to clarify what you're even talking about, and don't try to go in with the goal of tearing it down. Go in with the goal of trying to learn from them, because if you use that angle, you're going to meet each other on the same level. And if you both work on the same problem together, it's going to come out to a much more productive conversation where you try, instead of you thinking that you're in a higher position and you can like beat something out of a person.
Yes.
That makes sense. Dan, what do you think?
This is so my view on that is this. Absolutely, yes. When you talk to somebody, you need to clarify, but you use the word argue, and I think that's very interesting. I wouldn't consider my approach an argumentative method. I mean, I am, so like when I'm asking questions, I might pose a counterpoint, right? And that may not necessarily be my own counterpoint. That may be the reflection of another community that believes a different thing. Like I'll use the outsider's test of faith, for example, when talking about, well, okay, what if a Muslim is saying this? Like, what is your response? And it's merely just to test people. What I'm thinking, and not test them in the sense of I'm trying to piss them off, right? Test them in the sense of, okay, you have these beliefs, and I want to know, have you thought about these beliefs enough to where they can hold up to a certain level of scrutiny? Because oftentimes we do kind of hold beliefs sometimes, and we may get them from sources that aren't exactly reliable, or they confirm to our biases in some way. And it's important that we have someone in our lives to be able to check on those beliefs and see if they're true. So definitely, and by the way, these kinds of conversations, they don't really, they're not going to work on Twitter a lot of times, although I do know people that do try to do it on Twitter, and they have success with it. There's a certain level of media richness, as we say in comms theories, that is lost when you're using certain communication mediums for it. And so,
I need to get that word from you later.
That's good. There's a whole thing on it. But yeah, I would say yes, definitely, Jackson. If you are trying to talk to somebody about their God beliefs, number one, off the bat, figure out what exactly that means first before you give any kind of counterpoint or any kind of method that you want to use to talk about it.
Right. The main goal is go in with the idea of learning.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I like that. I like to use the word explore, because we can kind of learn. Yeah. We can learn new things together. Like I will learn things, but also hopefully the other person can maybe learn things too. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, a final question would be: do you think there is a general, all-encompassing definition of God that you can use if you don't exactly know their view, like something that could
I would say
what most people are talking about?
Yeah, I would say no. I think every single time you are talking about the word God, you're using a very specific context of that word. That word has meant everything under the sun since its inception, especially in the English language too.
Celebrate Thanksgiving with my mom, who's a Jehovah's Witness and doesn't celebrate holidays, but with my sister, who's a Christian, and me, who's a fairly prominent atheist. So even around a dinner table, Thanksgiving dinner table, there is different concepts of what God is and what God represents. And I think it's worthwhile to always never go into a conversation with an assumption.
Yes, I agree.
Or as few assumptions as possible.
Yeah, and if, like, let's say you want to make an argument, right? And you want to break down why you think something is wrong about this particular version of God, or why you don't think it exists, or whatever. Like, you always got to start off with which kind of God you're breaking down, because I don't know of a single, like, particular argument that necessarily proves or disproves, like, all conceptions of a God. Certainly, right. I think, and you'll notice that although apologetics across different religious cultures might be similar in some regards, the gods that they're talking about usually have specific identities or claims to them that are going to be unique to each individual. And I think that's something you have to take into account.
Not to get on a soapbox, but I think that also extends to Gnostic atheists who have a very limited or very narrow definition of God and say, that's what God is, and that doesn't exist, therefore no gods exist. I think atheists as well as theists can also fall into that trap as well. And I think it's always good to just be willing to have an open mind when you're talking to someone who may not believe what you believe, that they may not be talking about the God that you think they're talking about, despite using the same word.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. That
absolutely
clarified a lot.
Great. Hopefully that, you got something from that. We like to hear ourselves talk, I guess, but I think that we had I think Tyrone had some wisdom in there. I don't know about myself, but thanks for the call.
You did good, Dan.
Thanks for the call, Jackson. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. that was a good topic to bring up. And it says something about both of our methods of talking to people. This idea of clarification on the benefit of the person you're talking to. Because one of the things I hear, especially from religious communities when they're talking about, skeptics or atheists in general, is, they're using a straw man of my argument. They're trying to break this down, but this isn't actually what I believe. And I think that's really, really common. And it may be because that person hasn't actually heard an argument for their specific belief, or somebody that they've encountered before has misappropriated their beliefs and has misinterpreted what they mean when they talk about their beliefs. Very true.
I also think one of the things I love the most about SE is that compared to a debate where you see two people arguing with each other, atheists, theists, the audience are looking at that and they're saying, well, they're not, even if the theist does a bad job, he's just not representing my God very well. Mm-hmm. But when you have these FC conversations, you're having a very personal conversation with someone.
Yes.
And when you post it or make it personal or like make it public, people can look at that and say, well, how would I answer that if I was in that situation? Maybe I'd give that same exact answer. If I would give that same answer, maybe I need to look for better answers.
Absolutely.
And I feel like that kind of thinking is great for getting people to think more about how they arrive at their conclusions. And that's really the ultimate goal of street epistemology, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree. The advantage comes from it making it as personal as possible, because that way you're trying to reflect their beliefs most accurately, and your responses are going to reflect that in some way.
Right.
So let's go back to Cody in Minnesota, who wanted to talk to us. But from before, in case you were just joining us and you weren't here before, Cody was having a great conversation to us about his belief in antinatalism. Cody, are you there?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
I'm here.
So what we did was we kind of talked about it for a bit. We said that we take a break and we go back to it, and now we're coming back to it. How's it going, Cody? You have any other thoughts about what we were talking about earlier?
All right. So basically, you're talking about how if someone's child goes and robs a bank, would you be responsible for it if it was your child? Or you're asking if it'd be moral for them to be punished. I don't. All right. So what I was trying to say before was that, technically speaking, if person A gives birth to person B, and then person B goes and robs a bank, technically speaking, there is some responsibility, on person A for that having been possible, because, you can't deny that that person B, wouldn't have robbed the bank if person A didn't give birth to them. But should they be punished for it? I don't necessarily think that person A should be punished for robbing the bank, because it's person B that robbed the bank. But if we're living in a society where you want to punish people for immoral actions, then assuming that reproducing is immoral, then I would say, upon pretty much upon birth, when it's happened, that's kind of when you would punish. I don't know if it's moral in general to punish people, because is throwing someone in jail moral? If it's a random person, probably not. But is it any more moral to do it when, I don't really know, but
it depends
Cody,
on your.
Would you mind if I just?
Yeah, I was gonna say we were talking about different systems of morality, and you're kind of asking us now, is this moral to throw somebody in jail? And I would say, it depends on your view of how ethics works and what that might look like. So it's okay for you if you think it is or isn't. We're trying to approach this conversation on the understanding of what you already believe, and if you don't have any one beliefs either way, that's okay. But I think it would be helpful in the conversation if we knew exactly what framework you're working under, and if we could like ask questions about that. But Tyrone, you were going to ask something as well.
Cody, I agree with you that there's a line of causation between the child person B and the parent person A. So there's definitely that line of causation. And I also would say I'm really happy that you would find that relationship is not enough to subjugate a person to being culpable for another person's actions, and that you would still send person B to jail if they choose on their own volition to rob a bank, and that was apart from what person A decided to do, because people should be responsible for their actions. I'm going to throw out my philosophy real quick, and maybe you could critique that. Maybe that'd be a really productive way of moving forward.
Ooh,
but I would like to live in a society that is fruitful and long-lasting enough to be able to develop long-term projects that last even throughout a generation, and an infrastructure where everyone can be happy. And that's only possible if we're alive for a long time. So I have a vested interest in living in a society that wants to be around for a long time. If I had two societies, and one society was like, hey, have kids, try to propagate yourself and use resources in a responsible way. Some bad stuff might happen, some good stuff might happen, but you're likely to live longer here than this society over here, which outlawed making babies. They're dead in about 40 years. I can see almost objectively that the society that lives longer, it's the one that I'd rather be in. And so I would say I'd rather be in that society than the one that's going to be dead in a generation. Because of that, and because I want to be in a society that lives a long time, I would say I'm morally obligated to do what I can to be in a sustainable society rather than one that's not sustainable. What do you think?
Well, regardless of whether you live short or long, your life is temporary. Eventually, you will die and pass on. Every living, every human, at least, because I don't think it's possible for immortality necessarily. But eventually, everyone will die eventually.
But just to stay on point, one society will outlive the other. So so that's the distinction. Well, if people just decided to stop having kids, we would just pretty much be extinct, in a generation. But is that, again, it's kind of selfish because sure, we'll suffer more. We'll probably live a worse society. Businesses would go out of business. But if that's a sacrifice we have to kind of make for, just because in non-existence, if I were to snap my finger and nothing would exist, everything would cease to exist. It's kind of morbid in a way, but there is no obviously no pain and suffering, but also no happiness. But what there is basically just eternal peace.
Cody, are you saying Thanos did nothing wrong?
Oh my gosh, here we go.
But, yeah, sorry.
I'm just
Cody,
messing with you. No, wait. Well, hang on, Ty. I actually have a question I think is actually relevant here.
Dan.
Okay, so part of your answer is privileged on the idea that we are temporary beings. And that kind of factors into the equation of whether or not this idea of letting more lives into this world is moral or not. And I want to know, let's say it was the case that we figured out a way for people to live forever and that people could be immortal. Would that change your answer?
Well, I'm not really sure that, I'm not really sure that anyone would genuinely want to be immortal, because what kind of life would that I guess if you could get people to be immortal, and then eventually you would have to stop reproducing anyway, because then it'd just get way too overpopulated if people got to be immortal.
Probably. So then there could be a case there for antinatalism in that sense, right? Maybe. Yeah. I'm not saying that's true either way. I'm just saying it might be something interesting to think about if one of the criteria is that our lives are so short and that there's, a predetermined amount of suffering that could happen in some sense. Does that make sense?
Cody.
Oh.
I'm wondering if I gave you a button that you could push, and if you push it, no one's ever having babies ever again. Like from the moment you push that button onwards. I know you have your position, but what would stop you from pushing that button right now?
Well, right now, well, I don't know if I necessarily want to push it like right now. Like,
But
you
what
know,
would stop you
obviously
from it right
I'm
now?
a bit selfish myself. I mean, because actually no. Actually no. It would be. I don't really know if there is. I mean, it'd be kind of, you know, I'd probably, you know, if I were, I probably would push it hypothetically.
I'm asking you what reservations
in my
that would
lifetime.
keep you from pushing it.
All right. So what would keep me from pushing it?
Yeah.
All right. So no. All right. I mean, I guess I don't really see a reason why I would push. All right,
I
wouldn't
love
push
the
it right
fact
now,
you put
but
into your answers, by the way.
yeah. Okay, so what would stop me from?
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure right now if something would stop me. Like, it's
It's something to think about.
I know.
Yeah. So
Like, I feel like part of me feels like I'm being, because like when I've actually thought of this situation sort of where it's like I kind of like I feel like it would be kind of like I wouldn't want to be like the sole person like to make that decision necessarily because you know like I don't know if I want it to like suddenly we stop reproducing. Because there's two ways you could go about it, right? You could either push the button and people stop reproducing, or you push the button and you know existence as a whole, or at least life type of existence as a whole just stops. And if you stop it, you push the button and people stop reproducing, and then suddenly everyone's like, you know, infertile and stuff. You know, that's kind of, you know, it kind of puts, because, you know, some people like,
Yeah, it's
you
a
know,
big
when
violation of what they
can't-
want.
Yeah. But I think, like, everyone should be able to make their own, like, choices, like, based off, like, you know, if someone wants to.
So if I could
have
put it in a
like,
metaphor.
I wouldn't want to.
I want to try to help you out real quick. Let's say that like you disagree with eating meat and that's something you don't like, but you're not going to like force other people not to eat meat. For like as an example, is that kind of your view?
Sort of.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's basically saying, like, if you had to choose a fire type to start out your campaign, and I'm like,
God.
no, water type's the best type, I should let you choose the
Then
fire
you'd be
type, is
wrong,
basically saying.
first
as long as
of
it's not
all.
Magmar.
God. Tyrone, okay, that's a whole other thing that viewers of the show aren't going to understand, Tyrone. So way to alienate my audience, first of all. Thank you for that. To bring on your beef with me about which Pokemon starters are the best. All right. But
Oh my God.
that's something I'll have to SE with you on another time. But Cody, I want to thank you again for calling and talking to us about this. This was a really interesting conversation.
Yeah,
And-
Cody, I already like you more than Thanos.
Yeah, for
Oh yeah.
sure.
Well, Thanos, his philosophy, I don't agree with his philosophy. He wants to take
Good.
out half the population. You know,
I really
it's not
like
the
you.
same thing.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, this was interesting. If you want to talk more about this stuff, I'm sure there's some people on the ACA Discord right now that are watching and would love to like continue a conversation for sure.
That's awesome.
And we also have the SE Discord as well. We have a street epistemology one. That hopefully somebody in the chat could give links to those. I'd appreciate it. That'd be great. But Cody, thanks again. We'll talk to you next time.
All right. Yeah.
Sweet.
This is a good night of calls.
Good night of calls, but we do have to wrap it up. Until we do, though, we have one more caller on the line right now that I want to get to. This is Stuart in Colorado who wants to talk to us about ESP and mind reading. What's up?
Yeah. How's it going, guys?
Hey. Okay. Do you believe you have mind reading powers right now? Just getting it out of the way.
No.
Okay.
No.
You already know the answer to that.
Okay. Just making sure.
First off, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I've been a long time listener of the Atheist Experience, and I caught your first two official shows, and I definitely consider myself, amongst friends. I'm an atheist and a skeptic, and I try not to have any beliefs. But I've had some experiences. Say again?
Try not to have any beliefs. That's kind of interesting, but as Tyrone was just commenting on that.
Oh, I kind of missed some of that. I'm sorry. But, I don't really like the idea of belief. I try not to. A lot of things I don't know enough to have a belief one way or the other. Like the creation of the universe. How did that happen? Well, I don't know. I mean, I take the scientific explanation, but I don't really know. I don't really care too much because it doesn't really impact me. But so I want to sort of get away from that. Like to what I was talking about with the ESP kind of thing. So I've had some very powerful experiences in my life that you would call spiritual. I no longer do, but I don't know what else to call them. And part of it was with a friend of mine. She seems able to know things that are in my head. So do you want to just go into that, or I don't know if you want to hear about any of the other, like,
do you guys finish each other's sandwiches?
Oh my God, Tyrone.
What?
He's making a reference to a 2014 Disney movie.
You dabbed before the episode started, but continue, please.
That's not on the internet though. People can't see that. Anyway, okay, so let me try to cut to the chase here just a little bit, Stuart. Not that you're not doing a great job of explaining your beliefs. I think you're doing great, but I just want to ask you this one thing.
Sure.
Is there evidence for this idea that this person has ESP? Does it strictly come from personal experiences, or do you have other things to validate that?
So I'm going to push back a tiny little bit.
Okay, sure.
I'm not defining this as an ESP kind of experience.
Okay.
I don't know what the explanation is.
Okay.
But I also don't know what a possible explanation is.
Okay.
But let me just give you a couple of examples.
Yeah.
Like the most relevant example was we were playing cards one night. I think we were playing Go Fish, like something very easy. And she just seemed to know every single card that I had in my hand. And, it's like, it's not fair. Like, she, I forget how you play Go Fish, but like every time I put something down, she would take it or whatever it was. I'm like, damn it. Like, it seems like you know every card in my hand. I said, well, let's try it.
Stuart,
so I said,
do you wear glasses?
I do.
There you go.
I'm not sure I was at the time. That's a good point.
I'll let you think.
That's a good point.
That's funny.
Okay. I might have been wearing contacts at the time, so I'm not sure.
Tyrone,
but
you're being a bad co-host right now. Stop it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's actually very insightful. But I said to her, like, just name like 6 cards, and she, that you think are in my hand, and she did, and I had all of them. I'm like, okay, great. And that's coincidence, I guess. But then I said, okay, let's test this, and I said, I'm going to think of something. And you tell me what I'm thinking of, and take your time, and she did, and it wasn't like, oh, maybe it's this or that, and she didn't say like looks like it might be a this or that. She got them like 4 or 5 things right in a row, and it was like, I remember 3 of them very distinctly. So one of them was the color green. And she guessed that. And one was
I'll
a
write these
snake,
down before he says them.
and she guessed that. And one was a light bulb, and she guessed that. And I'm like she just said one, she just said the answer, nothing else.
Ooh.
And I'm like, to me, it's not explained, but I don't even know what a possible explanation could be.
Does she claim that she can actually read your mind?
That kind of thing, yeah. She's
Okay.
way more into the woo. Yeah.
Okay, so this is what my initial response is, because like I'm not like a magician or somebody like James Randi who would be able to like come up with scenarios on how to like test this better. One thing does come to mind though, and like I'm not necessarily suggesting that like she's cheating or anything, or that like she's not being sincere about her belief. But there could be things that through the processes of, and I don't want to use, I don't think like subliminal, I think subliminal messaging is overrated, although, that's a possibility. She could be giving you insights into your mind and stuff. But I think a good way for you to test it, and this is just my suggestion, if you want to come up in the future to see what's going on, is to write down the things that you want to think about ahead of time, and don't do any contact with her, and then write that up and put that in an envelope and seal it up, and then go to her and say, okay, I have these things that I thought about, or, and make it a category or something, I don't know, whatever you want to do. And I want to see if you know what this is. And don't even present to her the envelope, by the way, because she could see it through the light or something like that. But like, say that you have it, just show her and then see where that takes you. And I can almost guarantee that it's not going to go as well. Like that.
And if it does,
does
that still confirm that she has ESP, Dan?
I mean, it would. It's an explanation to a set of events, but it wouldn't confirm.
Like time traveler?
It wouldn't confirm it. I never said that it was the explanation. I said it is one of many possibilities, right? Like This is why I'm saying this, because.
So guys.
Yeah.
I just don't know what the possibilities are. Because there
are so many.
There's a lot. Look, James Randi actually does the same trick that you're talking about right now on YouTube, and he has this thing where this guy, he had a bunch of cards and he put them in the envelope, and he was still able to guess the same thing. Now, we did this trick, but
let me ask you this though.
Yeah.
If you just thought of the color green, and then a snake, and then a light bulb, and the person you were asking guessed each of them without any other guesses. They just said, yep, color green, snake, light bulb. What would you think?
It's bizarre.
This is my...
Also, I have an idea. Snakes are green.
She's not trying to lie or anything.
No, so like another thing here is like you don't know like what kinds... I wasn't there for the conversation, right? So there's a lot of variables to me that are being left out. And I'm not saying that it's possible. I mean, it is possible that you could be misremembering things, but also we tend to attribute more significance to events in hindsight than we do when it's actually going on. So it may be the case.
I remember it pretty. I remember it I remember that very clearly because my jaw just dropped. And like we had other things like that, but that was like kind of the test as far as I was concerned. Like, I'm going to test this thing, and it seemed like she passed with flying colors.
Well,
Stuart, you might be right. Like your friend might be a psychic ESP user. We just encourage you to test it.
Yes.
Because the story, while very captivating and really awesome, also don't wear glasses when you play Goldfish. That's like sibling rivalry step number one. But figure out really cool ways to test that. And we'd be happy to hear them. In fact, we challenge you to do that and call back in next time. Is that cool?
Well, yeah, I may do that. I think I'm going to see her over Thanksgiving.
Yes.
But, I mean, to me, this was the test. And so I don't know what even what's even a possible explanation is a thing.
Is your test repeatable?
Anyway. Sorry?
Is it
your test
repeatable?
repeatable?
Yeah. Is it doable by other people?
I'm not, like if somebody else was thinking those things? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay, well,
do that.
Yeah.
Test it.
Let me say this. Like, I encourage you to go look up that James Randi video of him doing exactly what you're describing, and I guarantee in even more impressive detail. And here's something that's interesting about that whole take, because I've looked up explanations and nobody's willing to, he's not willing to really say what happened. Of course, there's people who speculate. But officially, I don't think he's ever actually explained how he does the trick. Now, it's not.
If you like to know how those tricks are done, check out Darren Brown's magic tricks.
Yeah, Dan Brown has some tricks. But as far as what is the likelihood of James Randi actually being a psychic, to me, we still have to give it a low probability, because one, James Randi is a pretty honest dude, and he never says he has psychic powers. He always says that everything he does is some sort of trick, even as elaborate as it is. But we have to, again, take in that background information that even though we may not have the best explanation for what exactly happened, that doesn't necessarily mean we need to go to these other kinds of explanations, because every single time we've tried to study ESP in laboratory settings, as far as I know, we don't really have, any reason to believe that it exists. And that's not to say that it's not possible that it could, and your friend could have it, but there's got to be a step up in the level of which we test that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, she definitely thinks she does. I don't even know that that's even a possibility.
But it sounds.
But I don't know what
any
any other
opportunity to have a willing participant.
Yes,
that's something that we could learn a lot from.
Hey, even better.
We highly encourage you to do it.
Let's do this. Get your friend to call this show next week, and she can try to read my mind, and let's see if it still works, because I'd be curious.
I'll see if she'll do that.
Nice.
Yeah,
what's that number again?
Gotta get that. Well, it's not on screen right now, but it's
right there.
It's in the corner. 512-686. The whole 9 yards. And you watch the show. I'm sure you're subscribed to the channel, hopefully.
There you go.
You got to be able to check that out. But
I will be in 5 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Stuart, this was a super interesting call. Thank you for calling in about this. And I am looking forward to, by the way, my email is truth@atheist-community.org. That is on the, that should be on the down thingy as well. And so if you want to email me about this later, and I encourage everyone else who's watching the show to email me about whatever they want to email about as well. But yeah, Stuart, I'm looking for a follow-up for this, man. I want to hear more. Okay?
Awesome.
We're excited.
All right, yeah, I hope I can give it to you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for calling.
Thanks, guys.
Man,
Did
oh
you
man.
just hang up on me?
Yes, I did. Sorry. We had another line on with Tyrone earlier for some technical issues, but
you can go on ahead and close out the show, Dan. It's okay.
No. We're gonna go ahead and wrap things up anyway. But first, let me tell you guys something. Let me tell you what happened. Okay. Before our show on Sunday night, when Anthony Magnabosco was on, we had around 500 subscribers to this channel. After Anthony came on and we did that premiere for Atheist Experience, right now, before I check the show, we've jumped up to 1,800 subscribers, which is awesome, which means that we are the fastest growing show that's ever come out of the ACA, like ever. Faster than Talk Heathen, faster than everything else that's going on here. And that is just wonderful. I am so happy. I hope today was another episode for you guys to enjoy, and look forward to more, episodes like this. I think we're finally getting the ball rolling, and we're getting all these great guests on. And I'm just so excited for the future, and for the future of the conversations that we have on this show. I think people have expressed that this is a good idea, and people really like it. So if you do like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel. That is Truth Wanted. If you want to find me somewhere else, I am on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan. Again, the email address is truth@atheist-community.org, where you can email me or any of the other people that help produce this show, and we can answer your questions or get you some follow-up on what you heard today. We also have a Patreon. If you want to subscribe and help this channel out even more, go to the Truth Wanted Patreon there. I'm also on the ACA Discord a lot. You can catch me on there if you want to talk to me. And we are also the only ACA show right now that is on Twitch. So if you like Twitch and you want to subscribe to that feed, if there's something else you want to get your, somewhere else you want to get your Truth Wanted goodness, that's a good one. Also, even more stuff. We are on iTunes and Spreaker. So if you want to get an audio version of this show, you can go to either of those platforms and get your Truth Wanted on there. Now, Tyrone, where can people find you at?
Still no audio, but we had a good time.
Okay. I didn't mean to. Yeah, so we had him on another call thing, and I accidentally hung up on him earlier. But I'm going to go ahead and give his information out. Tyrone is available on the Let's Chat YouTube channel. He's also at Let's Chat on Twitter. You should definitely check out his stuff. He has these really great SE conversations. He is like really, really freaking good at it, as you can see today. I am a huge fan of his work. And he also has the League of SE, which is a podcast he does where he talks about street epistemology stuff. So he is really good at that. Go check him out and support him. Next week, we are going to be having Cyrus the Skeptic on. If you like Cyrus, he has a YouTube channel where he kind of talks about skepticism in general. He's a buddy of mine, and I'm really excited to have him on. I'm sure he's going to be a really great guest, so be sure to check that out next week. But until then, that about wraps it up for tonight, folks. Thanks again for being on the stream. I really appreciate it. And Tyrone, I know you can't hear me, bud, but you did a great job tonight. Folks, thanks again. This has been a really fun time. Remember, always keep wanting the truth. Thanks again. We'll see you later.